I'm a big reader. I always have been, and I always will be. In fact, I'm on track to read more books by the end of this year than I ever have in a given year. I'm on track to finish 30 books. Now, that's a few weeks away, but I'm pretty excited about it. I think as an artist, it is super important to be well read because it exposes me to new ideas, new perspectives. It expands my thinking. It expands my horizons. That has always been important to me as an artist. Since I'm a nerd, I'm going to share some of my reading tools that I have, and then I'm going to share the top 12 books that I've read this year. The number one reason I've been able to read so many books this year is that I have read mostly audiobooks. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole debate over whether audiobooks is actually reading or if you need to read something with your eyes. I feel like there's no difference between those. In fact, sometimes I will have print and audio at the same time. I'll read the book. I like to highlight stuff and underline and make notes in the margins, but I also like to listen to audiobooks while I do other things, such as when I'm in the studio painting, or when I'm doing the dishes, or when I'm driving, or something like that. In the past, I would listen to podcasts or music while doing all those things. But I feel like audiobooks have a higher level of quality simply because they have been through a much more rigorous editing process than, say, podcasts, which I'm not knocking podcasts at all. Of course, a lot of the books that I have read I was introduced to by podcasts. So I'm not knocking podcasts at all. In fact, this is sort of a podcast too in itself. So nothing against podcasts. But I like audiobooks because I feel like it's been through a much more rigorous process for everything getting distilled down into the information I need to know. Simply because of the editing process, there is a more intentional, a more purposeful approach to the content. And if something turns out to be fluff, I have no qualms about just ditching a book and saying, I'm going to add this to the DNF list. If you don't know, DNF stands for did not finish. If I can't really get into it, I just won't keep trying. Now, what's been different about my reading this year, apart from audiobooks, it's that I have stretched myself beyond my usual preferred genres of sci-fi, business, and art. I still read plenty of books related to those, but this year I pushed myself to read poetry, history, politics, philosophy, science, and that definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone, but I think I'm better for it. Oh, here's the nerdy part. To track my reading and to stay on top of it, there are three main tools that I used. The first one is the StoryGraph, the second one is a field notes logbook, and the third thing is the Libby app. The StoryGraph is an independent app and website that allows you to track your reading progress and rate what you've read. It will take all of your information and put it in a graph. It'll graph how much you've read and when, and it'll show all of your reading habits and your moods and so forth. You can break things down by genre, by author. You can tell it was put together by somebody who is a big data nerd and somebody who loves reading and likes to get nerdy about it. So at the beginning of the year, I imported all of my Goodreads information into the StoryGraph, and then I began logging my progress. And then I have a field notes logbook. It's called the Index Edition. It's a 56-page logbook. I like this because I like to write things down by hand. Being a visual artist, I like to work with my hands. I like to get paint on my hands. I have always loved writing things down on paper. And then there's a part of me that worries that there will be some kind of a solar flare that will knock out all digital information and there will be a cyber apocalypse or something and we will need analog backups of important stuff like what we read. I'm also keeping this because I want my grandkids to know here's what I've read, here's what I thought about it, so that they can do the same things. They may not read the same books. They may go back and read classics. There are probably classics that are yet to come. They can write their own thoughts and say, oh, okay, here's what I thought about what I read, and here's how it relates to the world. I think recording your thoughts is important. I've also used the Libby app to listen to audiobooks. I can use my library card, which I already have, and check out audiobooks. The Libby app also supports ebooks, so if you have a Kindle or some other e-reader, it works with that just fine. And now for the top 12 books that I've read this year. Here we go. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Quiet by Susan Cain. Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Artpreneur by Miriam Schulman. Bittersweet by Susan Cain. Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday. The Small and the Mighty by Sharon McMahon. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. Right Thing, Right Now by Ryan Holiday. The Reckoning by Mary L. Trump. The Enneagram, A Christian Perspective by Richard Rohr. Now, given the books that I listed, and that's not even half of what I read this year, the general tone, when you look at all that, you may realize that there's a lot of depressing stuff in there, and yes, there is. And it has been really hard to fight back despair, and I've talked about that before, yet I remain cautiously optimistic. I've talked about how easy it is for me to slip into melancholy and just kind of stay there. And when you read books like Demon Copperhead and the dystopian novels I referred to, those nearly did me in. But I was a lot more hopeful after reading The Small and the Mighty and The Obstacle is the Way. So that's why I try to read a lot of different things, a lot of different genres, a lot of different topics, and just to try to get a lot of different perspectives, because it gets me out of my own perspective and it keeps me from getting stuck in not just my own perspective, but one perspective that says everything is bad and here's why, to if you take this kind of approach, life can go well, things can be better. And then, just more practical things, like marketing and stuff like that in Artpreneur. Well, there you have it. That's my top 12 books of 2025. Some of those were rereads. They were great. And some were okay. They were kind of, they were good, but they didn't resonate, and I didn't rate them high enough to get them into that top 12. Quite a few of these books, they are books I'm definitely going to recommend to my teenagers. So if you want to see my thoughts about all the rest of those books, and again, that was not even half of what I read, if you are curious, if you're so inclined, I'll put the link in the comments for where you can go see the my StoryGraph profile, and you can read all my thoughts on those. But what about you? I want to hear what you've read this year and what you're hoping to read next year. My goal next year is to read another 25 to 30 books, but I think I'm going to be a little more selective and not shoot so much for volume and more for quality. I want to continue reading more history, more poetry, and more philosophy. How about you? Let me know. I would love to hear it. So if this has been helpful, if any of this has been interesting, please go ahead and like and subscribe so we can continue to stay in touch. Thank you so much for your time. I'll talk to you soon.